Hello and welcome to Games as Lit 101. Faith is a pretty common and important theme in a lot of literature, and yet, for one reason or another, it's not one we often see in video games, especially in Western game development, but the entire medium, really. There are a number of potential reasons for this. Perhaps it's because video games began during a marked cultural shift towards scientific concepts and away from religious belief. Perhaps it's because video games generally want to give the player a feeling of agency, and asking them to put their fate in the hands of some narrative element of the game is kind of counterintuitive to that goal. Whatever the reason, it's just not explored as often in this medium as it is in a lot of others. Books have everything from literary classics that are explicitly religious, like the Chronicles of Narnia, to modern fantasy, like the Dresden Files. And film has everything from Signs to the Ten Commandments, and even Star Wars that very meaningfully touch on this whole concept. But for some reason, video games just don't have much of it. Now, it's important to note that despite the word's religious connotations, faith is not an exclusively religious concept. It's very important to religion, of course, and yeah, the word is usually used talking about religion, but it's not limited to it by any means. To have faith is essentially just to have confidence in something that isn't concretely knowable. But believing a friend will have your back is also faith. Trusting your allies to hold their own while you work toward an important objective is faith. Working from an expectation in order to achieve a desired outcome requires faith. And that's where we come to Phoenix Wright. I've mentioned the Ace Attorney series before on a few occasions because it's one of my absolute favorites. It's about a defense attorney who wants to protect the wrongfully accused, and the games use evidence, examination, and interrogation to form logic puzzles that lead the player, after a convoluted series of plot twists, to the truth of the case. And believe it or not, faith is actually a pretty major thematic element of this series, and interestingly enough, not even really where the spiritual elements of the story are concerned. So I'm not going to be giving any major spoilers here, but I will be dancing around some major events of the fifth game. So, in the first game, Mia Fey, Phoenix's mentor, gives him this advice. And that remains a common theme throughout the series. You can't know everything, but you have to start somewhere, so you believe in your client, you believe in your own ability to reason things out, and you kick down every lie and every obstacle that lies between you and the truth. So right out of the gate, we have the most commonly understood element of faith, the belief in something that you don't necessarily know is accurate, but we also have one of the relatively underappreciated elements of it, both within and outside of religious communities, that it also involves a fervent pursuit of that belief. Faith, ideally, isn't a static thing. Like anything in life, once we stop examining ourselves and learning, then we stop improving ourselves. This is why scientists work to further understand even very well-established scientific theories. It's why there are so many different theological ideas even within very long-running and well-established religions. And it's why there have been so many different artistic and cultural revolutions over the course of human history. We all have beliefs and understandings of how the world works, but the process of examining and improving them never ends. The Ace Attorney series is all about uncovering the truth, so while it uses faith in our clients as a starting point, the ultimate goal of these characters is to uncover what really happened. Belief, over time, gives way to understanding, as the truth is pursued by way of that belief and also the evidence that we have to interpret. But most strongly, we have an example from the fifth game, Dual Destinies. I won't give all the details because it's a huge spoiler, but in short, the characters are confronted with a terrible accusation that they don't want to believe. Phoenix reacts by doing what he always does, believing his defendant and marching forward, but Apollo is more personally invested in this case, and he doesn't take it as well. Apollo, in this instance, begins to doubt. He doesn't want to believe this, but the evidence is pretty strong, and he finds himself at a crossroads that he just can't go marching blindly through. Doubt is inexorably tied to faith. One can't really believe in something conceptual or immaterial without at least some degree of being kind of unsure about it, even when their basis in that belief is actually quite strong. And doubt is generally a pretty major player in how faith develops. There comes a time in the lives of most people who were raised with a religious background, for instance, where they start to question their beliefs a bit. The following months or years generally include a good deal of changes, major or minor, to the way they look at the world, and in the end they come out of this time having either abandoned their original beliefs or made them their own. This is essentially what Apollo is doing in this game. His doubt is too strong to ignore, so he sets out to investigate. He tries to reaffirm his faith in the face of some pretty strong evidence against it, and as you might imagine, still without spoiling anything, what he does find is of course quite important to the overall outcome of the case. I think the process is best described in Apollo's own words. And this is what impressed me so much about this game in particular. As we saw with that quote from Mia early in the series, faith has always been an element of the Phoenix Wright games, but this is one of the few times, not just in this series or even in video games, but in stories in general, that I've seen the role of doubt in faith and belief very realistically and accurately depicted. It's a common misconception that's sadly just as common within religious circles as outside of them, that faith is completely blind, that it just picks something it wants to believe and believes it without any thought or rationale or anything like that, and just is completely immovable from this spot for little more reason than that the person wants to believe this thing. And yeah, some people do use faith like that, but it's not a very healthy concept of it. Apollo's approach here is a depiction of faith at its healthiest, not afraid of challenge or further investigation, but born of enough confidence in one's belief that when doubt rears its head, you don't hide, you don't run away from it or ignore it, but you pull up the court record, examine the evidence, and if you're in the right, come out of it with a reaffirmed, stronger concept of what you believe and why you believe it. As I said, this isn't a theme commonly addressed in video games, and at some point I'll probably do an episode talking further about why that might be, but for now we can look to Phoenix Wright as a rather unlikely and surprisingly effective example. So, do you agree with the Ace Attorney series' depiction of this oft-ignored concept? Whatever your beliefs, feel free to discuss and examine them further in the comments, and make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed the episode. In the description, you can also find links to follow Games as Lit 101 on Facebook, Twitter, and if you want to support the show, Patreon as well. Next week, we'll be approaching the release of the final film in the Hunger Games series, so I'm finally gonna make good on an old promise and have an episode theorizing about how that series could be adapted into a video game. So, until then, class dismissed.